Today's video is brought to you by the essential tool for Middle Eastern travel, NordVPN. Qatar Airways has a problem, and it could be their biggest yet. As one of the world's largest international airlines, the Doha-based carrier operates a staggering fleet of 233 aircraft, including 173 wide-bodies, which should be more than enough to serve their 140-odd destinations, right? Even with one aircraft per route, they should have more than enough. They could even send 2 or 3 to some destinations and have spares, especially considering that the majority of their network is reachable within 6 or so hours from Doha. Strangely, this is not the case. In fact, Qatar Airways has run out of planes, and at the worst possible time. What is causing this dramatic supply crunch? Well, I'll let you know, because the clock is ticking for the airline to resolve it, and with both Airbus and Boeing partly to blame, they have nowhere to turn. This is Qatar Airways' big problem. Anyone who subscribes in the next 7 days will be entered to win a $100 airline gift card like this subscriber who joined the family last week. If you had told someone 30 years ago that one of the world's best airlines would be based in the tiny Gulf state of Qatar, operating non-stop service to roughly 100 countries, they would have had to be pretty visionary or delusional to believe you.
It was good, wasn't it? Let's face it.
No.
Yet, since their launch in 1993, Qatar Airways has been featured in about 20 videos on my channel, which is quite the accomplishment. But more importantly, they've grown at breakneck speeds. They've operated every wide-body aircraft available during that time apart from the 767, which has allowed them to offer massive capacity to cities near and far, from Dubai all the way to Auckland. Despite this, capacity has long been a concern for them. For many years, they were growing so fast they couldn't keep up, at least until 2017 when the Gulf Blockade was announced. This political sanctioning of Qatar prohibited the nation's airline from flying to almost all neighboring Gulf states, and worse yet, it banned them from even using their airspace for overflight. Suddenly, the airline had an abundance of aircraft that they didn't know what to do with, so they went on a destination launching spree, commencing flights to secondary cities all over Europe and Asia, from smaller cities in Oman to Pakistan to Thailand to my hometown of Gothenburg, Sweden. This was a great way to use their aircraft and add value to the industry by connecting secondary cities to megacities with just one stop in Doha. By 2019, they'd gotten to the point where they were operating so many flights under their new strategy that they again had a lack of airplanes. They went from an abundance to a lack in just 2 years, which is pretty remarkable. Understandably, this constrained their growth until the COVID-19 pandemic helped Qatar Airways, and many other airlines for that matter, with one thing. It removed any concern of having too few aircraft. Suddenly, Qatar Airways was operating flights to 30 destinations, merely 1/6 of their pre-pandemic network, with significantly fewer frequencies. They decided to ground many aircraft like their 777-200LRs, their A330s, and their A380s. In the meantime, they demanded Boeing and Airbus halt all deliveries until things normalized, a process the airline expected to take at least a couple of years. 2 to 3 years without deliveries didn't seem like a problem given the superfluous fleet they had at that point, so they were good. Since cargo is often carried in the belly of passenger aircraft, and these flights were few and far between in the middle of 2020, Qatar Airways pivoted their business toward cargo. Many passenger planes were stripped and temporarily repurposed as full-time freighters, with dozens of passenger planes left to spare for when demand returned. During this time, the airline had a few Boeing 787-9s waiting for them in the desert, 7 to be exact. These had been delivered pre-pandemic, but their cabins weren't ready at that point, so they were sent into temporary hibernation. With demand for cargo flights surging, Qatar Airways eventually thought, hang on a minute, we have these incredibly fuel-efficient aircraft with no cabin sitting ready to fly, and cargo operations are more lucrative than ever, so why don't we use them for cargo flights until demand picks up? That's precisely what they did, but in January 2021, something unexpected happened. On January 4th last year, the 3-year-long Gulf blockade against Qatar came to an end. From one day to the next, Qatar Airways was once again able to use Saudi, Emirati, Bahraini, and Egyptian airspace. They were also able to relaunch flights to 3 of those countries with pretty much immediate effect. Obviously, they wouldn't be relaunching 18 daily flights to Dubai like they had in 2017, but fast forward to January 2022 and Qatar Airways flies to 4 cities in Saudi Arabia, 3 in the United Arab Emirates, and 2 in Egypt, most with multiple daily frequencies. They also fly to 130 or so other destinations, meaning they've almost reached their pre-pandemic daily departure numbers. Yet their business looks very different from before the pandemic. Their cargo division is thriving, and many passenger aircraft are still being used on cargo-only flights to the most profitable destinations, whether that's in China, Germany, the US, or even Luxembourg. Their fleet is being pushed to the max. More problematically, as you've probably heard by now, the Airbus A350, previously the shining star of their fleet, has been a pretty bad student.
What the hell we gonna do now?
And roughly 24 of them have been parked, some for over 6 months at this point. Why? Because Qatar Airways discovered that there's an issue with the second layer of coating peeling off, exposing the aircraft components underneath. Since Qatar Airways came forward, 6 other airlines, including Lufthansa and Finnair, have come forward and confirmed the issue, although they've decided against grounding theirs. That's because Airbus has told them the same thing they've told Qatar Airways, that they could easily start flying all their A350s tomorrow without a safety risk. Yet, the Qatari Aviation Safety Agency is persistent, which sort of makes sense. Regardless of their intentions and whether or not it's a safety risk, there's a major cosmetic issue on not one, but dozens of purchases, costing hundreds of millions of dollars each. For crying out loud, if our phone or computer coating started peeling off for no reason, we would absolutely go back to the store and demand a fix or replacement. Isn't it reasonable to demand the same for a mass purchase worth billions of dollars? But that isn't even what Qatar Airways is asking for. All they want is an explanation for the cause of the issues. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Obviously no one is completely right or wrong in this situation, and it's incredibly complicated. Regardless, a massive chunk of their A350 fleet is grounded, which has forced them to bring back, as of uploading this video, 4 A380s and all remaining A330s, and order off-the-shelf seats to quickly fit their 7 787-9s for passenger flights to fill this void. They've also, unfortunately, brought back their non-Q Suite 777s to passenger service, so they really are pushing it. The obvious question now is, what can they do to resolve this problem? Well, the answer is obvious. Take delivery of more airplanes as soon as possible, which it turns out is literally impossible. Why is it impossible? Well, let's start with the A350. Although Airbus has several A350s waiting for Qatar Airways in Toulouse, and the airline could probably resume A350 flights ASAP, this isn't really an option because it's good to be consistent. Over a year after Qatar Airways discovered the A350 fuselage issues, Airbus has not come to an agreement with the airline. Luckily, they have a massive order for a different Airbus aircraft, namely the A321neo. This aircraft could solve some of their supply issues, right? Well, the A350 comes in the way again. These deliveries were supposed to start this year, and at least there aren't any known issues with the coating of the A321. However, the A350 drama has taken a turn for the worse, to the point where Qatar Airways has said they're hesitant to do any business with Airbus whatsoever. Just today, in an unprecedented move, Airbus cancelled all Qatar Airways A321neo orders. By doing this, Airbus effectively stabbed the airline in the back. The implications of not getting these aircraft are unfathomably huge for their future growth potential. The airline doesn't really have any options at this point, so the only way out is to make up with Airbus. I have no idea how this will unfold, but it will be fascinating to follow. Well, thank goodness for competition. Boeing saves the day. With over 70 wide-body aircraft on order from Boeing, Qatar Airways should theoretically have their capacity needs met at this point. Unfortunately, the old saying of "if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going" has transformed into "if it is Boeing, it ain't going" in the past few years.
No ma'am.
Which aircraft is currently first on the list to be added to the Qatar Airways fleet? The 787 Dreamliner, which is in fact more of a nightmare liner for airlines and for Boeing. Not a single 787 has been delivered since May 2021, and deliveries are not expected to resume for months to come. The A350 coding issue pales in comparison to the myriad of issues plaguing the 787. But again, this means no deliveries for Qatar Airways until summer at the earliest. Let's not even talk about the 777X, which was also supposed to be operated by Qatar Airways this year and is facing many issues of its own. That, in a nutshell, is Qatar Airways' problem, but they are far from alone. American Airlines has a similar issue, in their case solely because of Boeing. Unlike American, however, Qatar Airways has a clock which is ticking away until the most important event in its history. In November of this year, Qatar expects to welcome tourists in numbers it's never seen before. They are hosting the FIFA World Cup, and they're hoping this will put the country and thus its airline on the map as a prime destination rather than a transit point. Is there anything Qatar Airways can do to relieve the pressure as the World Cup draws closer and closer? We can think of it like this. There are two things they can do. Firstly, they can add more airplanes, which is difficult. Secondly, they can fly to fewer destinations, which is also difficult. Yet, they are somehow managing to do both. As lovers of the latest technology, the airline isn't keen to go shopping in the overfilled scrapyards and pick up abundant for sale 777s, A330s, or A380s that airlines got rid of back in 2020. Instead, they're leasing aircraft, a strategy they've employed for the better half of a decade to fill demand. This time they've turned to an airline where they own a stake, an airline that makes perfect sense: Hong Kong-based Cathay Pacific. The poor former world-renowned airline is still suffering more than almost any other airline in the world from the pandemic, and has still grounded most of their fleet. And Qatar Airways has so far opted for the 777. Right now, only 3 of these have been delivered, and they're only being used on cargo routes for now, which is freeing up Qatar Airways' own 777s for passenger flights, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more aircraft added, especially through the end of 2022. The second solution of flying to fewer destinations is also being executed in a pretty smart manner. They don't want their network to shrink, so they're looking at destinations where they can outsource their flights to partners. In the past few months, we've seen a slew of airlines launch or resume service to Doha, almost always leading to Qatar Airways cutting service on that route or frequency. For example, Rwanda Air recently took over the Kigali to Doha route with a 737, which is pretty depressing compared to the Qatar Airways 787 previously on the route. The same goes for British Airways taking over the London Gatwick to Doha route on its aged 777s. Next summer, passengers will have the pleasure of being able to fly American Airlines instead of Qatar Airways on one of 3 daily flights from New York to Doha. I expect this trend of outsourcing to continue as well, so keep an eye out for partner airlines launching flights to Doha. Although these suggestions might be unlikely, could we soon see Cathay Pacific serving Doha to Hong Kong, LATAM serving Doha to Sao Paulo, or even Finnair serving Doha to Helsinki? These might not be the most likely outcomes, but they're not impossible. With that, I hope you learned something today. I'm always glad to spill out all this nerdiness I've been hoarding for the past months. Will you be flying with Qatar Airways soon? If so, do you have NordVPN yet? It took me a dozen flight connections in the Middle East before I realized that the reason my FaceTime or Skype didn't work was because the governments blocked them. Even now, I sometimes forget, but having NordVPN installed on my phone saves me every time. Also, have you guys ever been watching a TV show, then you go abroad and suddenly it's not available anymore? That's because different countries have different selections on streaming services, and NordVPN lets you bypass that as well. This is all in addition to the obvious benefit of a VPN, which is added cybersecurity. Go to nordvpn.com/nonstopdan or use code nonstopdan to get a 2-year plan with 73% off with 1 month free. All of it is at the link at the top of the description. I'm gonna go back to watching Netflix now. Oh, and there's no harm trying them because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee.